Emma sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup as she stared at the faint crack along its edge. It was barely visible, a hairline fracture that only revealed itself in the right light. She knew exactly how it had happened. Alex had dropped it months ago, hastily placing it back on the shelf as if pretending it wasn't broken would somehow make it whole again. She hadn't realized how perfectly that crack mirrored their marriage until last night. Thais. Words were still echoing in her head. It was just once. I didn't mean for it to happen. Alex's voice had wavered, his eyes heavy with guilt as he stood in their bedroom doorway. The weight of his confession had hit her like a punch to the chest. She hadn't known what to say, her mind a blur of anger, disbelief, and pain. She set the cup down and looked at the clock. It was already past 9. He'd stayed at his brother's house last night, giving her space, but she knew he'd come back. They couldn't avoid each other forever. She heard the sound of his car pulling into the driveway before she saw him, his silhouette lingering outside the door as if he were afraid to come inside. He finally entered, his shoulders hunched, his gaze fixed on the floor. Emma. His voice was hollow. Can we talk? She looked up, her eyes cold. I don't know what there's left to say. He took a tentative step closer, his face etched with regret. I know I hurt you. I know I can't take it back, but I want to make this right. Emma's laugh was bitter, sharp. Make it right? You think you can just fix this like it's some broken appliance? His jaw tightened, pain flickering in his eyes. I messed up, but it didn't mean anything. It was just a mistake. A mistake, she repeated, her voice icy. Who was she? Alex hesitated, his face paling. I deserve to know. He looked away, shame twisting his features. Her name's Lauren. We worked together on that project last summer. Emma's stomach churned. She remembered him mentioning her before, casually, in passing. She remembered how he'd laughed at some joke she'd made, how his eyes had lit up just a little too brightly. She'd ignored the sting of jealousy back then, convincing herself she was just being paranoid. How long? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Once, he insisted, his voice pleading. It was just once. We were working late. I was stressed. It didn't mean anything, Emma, I swear. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly. But trust was like that cracked cup. Once broken, it was never the same. How long have you been lying to me? Alex flinched. 3 months. The air was sucked out of the room. 3 months. He'd been sleeping beside her, kissing her. Good night. Pretending everything was normal for 3 months. I can't. Her voice broke. I can't even look at you. He moved toward her, his eyes desperate. Please, Em. I love you. It was a stupid, thoughtless mistake. I don't want to lose you. She closed her eyes, tears stinging. You already did. Chapter 2. Fractured promises that night, Emma couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Alex with Lauren, laughing, touching, kissing. She felt sick, humiliated. How could she have been so blind? She went through his phone the next morning, her hands trembling. He didn't fight her. He just sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. She found the messages, short, meaningless, exchanges that cut deeper than any love letter ever could. The words were casual, impersonal, but that was what hurt the most. He'd risked their entire marriage for something so trivial. She threw his phone at him, her face twisted with rage. You destroyed us for that? Alex looked up, his eyes hollow. I never meant to. Stop saying that, she screamed. You didn't mean to. Do you even hear yourself? He had no answer. Chapter 3. Secrets unraveled, Emma didn't know why she went to see Lauren. Maybe she needed to look her in the eye to understand why Alex had thrown everything away. She found her at the marketing agency where they'd worked together, standing in the lobby with a fake smile plastered on her face. Lauren's eyes widened when she saw her. "Emma, I don't." Emma cut her off, her voice low. "I don't want your excuses." Lauren's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. It just happened." Emma clenched her fists. "People don't just accidentally fall into bed together." "It didn't mean anything," Lauren whispered, tears pooling in her eyes. "He loves you." "Then why?" Lauren looked down, shame flushing her cheeks. "Because I was lonely, because he was there, because I wanted to feel wanted." Emma stared at her, disgusted. "Was it worth it?" Lauren shook her head, tears spilling over. "No, it wasn't." Chapter 4. Uncertain Futures. That night, Emma sat on the floor of her bedroom, staring at the wedding photo on her nightstand. They looked so happy, so full of promise. It felt like a lifetime ago. Days turned into weeks, and the suffocating pain didn't go away. It merely shifted, dulling into a heavy ache that Emma carried everywhere. Every corner of the house was haunted by memories. Alex's laugh echoing from the kitchen, his touch lingering on the bedsheets, his voice whispering promises that now felt hollow. They went to couples therapy, sitting in the dimly lit office of Dr. Myers, a middle-aged woman with gentle eyes and a voice as soft as falling snow. Emma hated how easily Alex spoke in those sessions, how he apologized and admitted his flaws with practiced sincerity. She couldn't tell if he was genuinely remorseful or just playing the part of the repentant husband. "What do you want, Emma?" Dr. Myers asked during their third session. Her eyes were fixed on her, unflinching. Emma swallowed hard, her mouth dry. "I want to believe him, but I don't know how." Alex's face crumpled, and for a moment, she saw the man she used to love, the man who held her through sleepless nights and laughed at her stupid jokes. But then she remembered his lies, his betrayal. She looked away. Dr. Myers leaned forward. "Rebuilding trust isn't about forgetting the past. It's about finding a way to live with it. Are you both willing to do that?" Alex's voice was barely above a whisper. "Yes." Emma hesitated, her heart pounding. I don't know." Chapter 6. Echoes of Doubt. The doubts refused to leave. They clung to Emma, shadowing her every thought. Every time Alex was late coming home, every time he looked at his phone and his face tightened, she wondered if he was still lying. One night, she confronted him. "Are you still talking to her?" Alex looked up from his laptop, his eyes wide with surprise. "No, I told you. It's over." "How can I believe you?" Her voice was sharp, accusing. He closed his laptop, his shoulders slumping. "I don't know. I don't know how to convince you that I'm telling the truth." "Did you delete her number?" "Yes." "Did you block her?" "Yes." She bit her lip, her chest tightening. "Then why does it still feel like she's here? Between us?" Alex looked away, his jaw clenching. "Because I broke us, Emma. I broke what we had, and no matter what I do, I can't go back and change that." His honesty was brutal, and it hurt. But it was the first time she felt like he was being real. She turned away, her hands trembling. "I don't know if I can live like this, constantly questioning everything." Alex's voice broke. "I don't know how to fix it, but I'm not giving up on us." Chapter 7. Whispers of Betrayal. The rumors started 2 months after Alex's confession. It began with a phone call from Rachel, her best friend since college. "Emma, I didn't know how to tell you, but I heard something about Alex," Rachel said hesitantly, her voice crackling over the phone. Emma's stomach dropped. "What is it?" Rachel hesitated. "Lauren, she's pregnant." The world tilted, and Emma had to grip the kitchen counter to steady herself. What? Some of the girls at the office are saying it's Alex's, that they were having an affair for months, not just once. No, he told me. He said it was only once. I thought you should know. Rachel's voice was gentle, apologetic. I just didn't want you to hear it from someone else. Emma hung up without saying goodbye. Her vision blurred, her heart pounding painfully in her chest. She felt nauseous, like she couldn't breathe. She confronted Alex the moment he walked. Through the door, the accusation tearing from her lips before he could even set his keys down. Did you get her pregnant? He froze, his face draining of color. What? Lauren. Is she pregnant? His eyes widened, panic flashing across his face. I didn't know. The lie was so obvious, so blatant that Emma laughed, a broken, bitter sound. You knew. You knew, and you still let me believe it was just one mistake. You let me believe you were trying to fix this. I didn't. He ran a hand through his hair, his shoulders sagging. I didn't want to hurt you anymore. Emma's chest tightened, fury boiling inside her. You didn't want to hurt me? Do you have any idea what you've done? I never wanted any of this. His voice cracked, his eyes pleading. I was stupid, I was selfish. I was scared. She stared at him, disbelief washing over her. You're not the victim here, Alex. You did this. You ruined us. He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know what to do. She felt nothing but cold, hollow emptiness. You should have thought of that before you destroyed our life. Chapter 8. Crossroads. Emma stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. She looked like a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed, broken. She didn't recognize herself anymore. She went to see Lauren again. This time there were no tears, no apologies, just silence and raw, aching pain. Lauren's face was swollen, her eyes puffy. She looked exhausted, defeated. I didn't know I was pregnant until after everything. The days that followed were a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and awkward exchanges as Emma and Alex navigated the logistics of their separation. It was painfully civil, each of them carefully choosing words that wouldn't cut too deep, avoiding eye contact that might reveal too much. Emma moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, far from the house they had once shared. It was modest and bare, the walls empty and echoing, but it was hers. She stood in the center of the living room, surrounded by unpacked boxes, and felt a strange mix of liberation and loneliness. Alex tried calling several times. She let the calls go to voicemail, her heart twisting every time she heard his voice. He sounded lost, pleading for another chance, asking to talk, to explain. She deleted each message without listening to the end. It wasn't that she didn't want to forgive him. It was that she didn't know how. Chapter 11. Shadows of the Past. Emma threw herself into work, taking on extra projects and staying late at the office. The distraction was welcome, but her co-workers noticed the change. Rachel in particular watched her with worried eyes. You look like hell, Rachel said one evening, leaning against Emma's cubicle with crossed arms. You're not sleeping, are you? Emma shrugged, forcing a smile. Just trying to stay busy. Rachel didn't buy it. You don't have to do this alone, you know. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. For a moment, Emma's facade cracked. Her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. I don't even know what to say anymore. I feel hollow. Rachel's face softened. That's normal. But it doesn't last forever. Emma wasn't sure she believed that. Chapter 12. Unfinished Business. The knock on her apartment. Daughter startled her. It was late and she wasn't expecting anyone. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw Alex standing there, his shoulders slumped, his eyes tired and swollen. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was cold, guarded. He looked, down, his hands trembling. "I couldn't. I just needed to see you." Emma's chest tightened. "I don't think that's a good idea. Please." His voice cracked, raw and vulnerable. "Just 5 minutes. I need to tell you something." Against her better judgment, she let him in. He looked out of place in her tiny apartment. His presence too big, too familiar. He stood awkwardly in the middle of the living room, his eyes taking in the sparse furniture and unopened boxes. "You really left?" Emma crossed her arms, keeping her distance. "What did you expect?" He flinched, pain flickering across his face. "I deserve that." She wanted to yell at him, to scream about how much he had hurt her, how deeply he had shattered her trust. But all she felt was exhaustion. "What do you want, Alex?" He looked down, his shoulders sagging. I wanted you to know that I'm not giving up on us. I'm getting help, therapy. I'm trying to figure out how I let things get this bad." Emma's chest tightened, her throat burning. "Why now?" "Because losing you, it broke me," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I didn't realize how much you meant to me until I saw you walk away." She swallowed the lump in her throat, her eyes stinging. "You should have realized that before you slept with her." He looked up, his face pale. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself for it." Silence hung heavy between them, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. I needed you to know that I'm trying. Even if you never take me back, I need to be better. For me, and for you." His voice cracked, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm sorry, Emma. For everything." She wanted to hate him. She wanted to slam the door in his face and never look back. But seeing him like this, broken, vulnerable, human, made it harder to hold on to her anger. She looked away, her voice trembling. "I can't forgive you. Not yet." "I understand," he whispered, his shoulders slumping. "I just needed you to know." He turned to leave, his head hanging low. She watched him go, her heart breaking all over again. When the door closed behind him, the apartment felt emptier than before. Chapter 13. Fractured Reflections Weeks. Passed, and Alex's words echoed in her mind, haunting her even as she tried to move forward. She hated that he was still a part of her, that his pain still mattered to her. She hated that she missed him. She met with her lawyer to finalize the divorce. Everything was straightforward. No fighting over assets, no disputes about money. Alex agreed to everything without argument, signing the papers without hesitation. But as she watched his hand tremble while he signed his name, she felt a pang of guilt. She had wanted him to suffer, to feel the same pain she had endured. But seeing him like this only made her feel emptier. Afterward, she sat alone in her car, the divorce papers on the passenger seat. It was over. The life they had built together was officially gone. So why did she feel so lost? They sat together in Alex's dimly lit living room, the air thick with hesitation and unspoken words. The room was bare, a stark contrast to the home they had once shared. It felt temporary, uncertain, just like them. Alex sat on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped tightly, his eyes fixed on the floor. Emma perched on the armrest, keeping her distance, her body tense and guarded. Neither of them knew how to start, how to bridge the chasm between them, but the silence was suffocating. "How long?" Emma's voice was barely above a whisper, but it shattered the quiet. Alex's shoulders tensed. He looked up, his eyes raw with shame. "A few months. It wasn't constant, but it was enough." She swallowed, her throat burning. "Why her?" He closed his eyes, his face twisting with pain. She was there. She listened when I felt like I was falling apart. It wasn't about her, not really. It was about me. My own failures, my own fears. I was weak. Emma's jaw tightened. You could have talked to me. I know, he whispered, his voice cracking. I should have. But I was afraid of disappointing you, of being less than what you needed. His words hung heavy between them, echoing in the emptiness of the room. She wanted to scream at him, to accuse him of cowardice, of selfishness. But the anger didn't come. Only exhaustion. I don't know how to forgive you, she admitted, her voice trembling. I don't know if I even want to. He looked, down, his face crumbling. I understand. I don't deserve it. I need you to know that I'm trying to change. I'm in therapy. I'm facing my own demons. The ones I didn't even know I had. She looked at him. Really looked at him. He seemed smaller, broken in a way she had never seen before. It made it harder to hold on to her anger, but she couldn't let herself soften. Not yet. I don't know what to do with that, she said quietly. I don't know if it's enough. It probably isn't, he admitted, his voice hollow. But I'm not doing it to get you back. I'm doing it because I need to be better, even if you're not there to see it. Her heart twisted painfully. She hated that he still mattered, that his pain still hurt her. She hated that she was standing here, torn between love and betrayal. I can't promise anything, she whispered. I can't promise forgiveness, or even friendship. I don't know what I want yet. He looked up, his eyes wet and pleading. That's okay. Just don't shut me out. Even if it's just as two broken people trying to heal, don't walk away. Her throat tightened, tears burning her eyes. I don't know if I can do this. His voice was raw, desperate. Then, let's not decide anything today. Let's just exist, one day at a time. She looked at him. At the man she had loved and hated. The man who had broken her and was now asking to help her rebuild. It would be easier to leave, to close the door and never look back. It would be simpler to hate him, to let her pain fester and become anger. But something kept her rooted in place. Hope, maybe, or love, or just the need to understand. Okay, she whispered, her voice shaking. One day at a time. For the first time in months, a flicker of something passed between them. Tentative and fragile, but real. Neither of them knew where this road would lead, or if they would find their way back to each other. But for now, it was enough to try. And days turned into weeks, and Emma found herself returning to Alex's apartment more often than she intended. Not out of forgiveness or reconciliation, but out of a need to understand, to piece together how they had ended up here, at this impasse, between love and betrayal. They spoke in fragments, never quite touching the heart of the matter but circling around it, their conversations full of unfinished sentences and hesitant confessions. They avoided words like us or future, clinging to safer topics, work, news, memories of happier times. But the shadows were always there, lingering between them. One evening, Emma stood by his kitchen window, watching the rain slide down the glass in crooked lines. Alex moved quietly behind her, setting plates on the counter, his presence familiar, yet distant. This feels strange, she admitted, her voice soft, almost drowned out by the rain. He paused, looking at her. Back. I know. Sometimes it feels like nothing's changed, but then it hits me all over again. She turned, her eyes sharp. I don't want that. I don't want to pretend everything's okay. He looked down, shame coloring his face. I don't either. I don't know how to be around you without wanting to fix it, without wishing I could take it all back. Her chest tightened. You can't. And maybe that's the hardest part. His shoulders sagged, his hands gripping the edge of the counter. I know. But I'm here, Emma. No matter how hard this gets, I'm here. She looked at him, really looked at him. He was trying. But was it enough? I miss who we were, she confessed, her voice breaking. I miss the life we had. His eyes glistened, pain evident. Me too. Every single day. They stood in silence, the rain tapping against the window like a heartbeat. Emma felt the weight of all they had lost pressing down on her, suffocating and unrelenting. But beneath it, there was something else. A glimmer of possibility, a whisper of hope. It terrified her. She turned away, unable to face him any longer. I should go. Alex's face fell, but he didn't protest. Okay, but can we keep doing this? Talking, I mean. Even if it's hard? Emma hesitated at the door, her hand hovering over the handle. She didn't know if she could survive reopening all those wounds. But she also couldn't ignore the small voice inside her, the one that still cared. One day at a time, she repeated, echoing his words from before. A faint smile crossed his lips. One day at a time, she left without looking back, her heart heavy but her resolve firm. Chapter 17. Unraveling Lies. Emma's attempts to piece together her life after Alex's betrayal were messy, filled with confusion and contradictions. Some days she felt strong, ready to move on without him. Other days she woke up feeling shattered, her thoughts tangled with memories she wished she could erase. She threw herself into work, into hobbies, into anything that would occupy her mind. But the questions never went away, haunting her like ghosts she couldn't exorcise. Why had he done it? Was it really just about his own insecurities? Or was there more he wasn't telling her? It was on one of these restless days that she found herself at Lucy's cafe, seeking comfort in routine. She watched the rain through the window, her fingers curled around a mug of hot coffee. Lucy sat across from her, concern etched on her face. You look exhausted, Emma managed a weak smile. I feel exhausted. Nothing makes sense anymore. Lucy hesitated, her fingers tapping on the table. Have you asked him everything you need to know? Really asked? Emma looked away, her stomach twisting. I don't know if I want to hear the answers. You need closure, Em. You deserve the whole truth, even if it's ugly. Emma's eyes stung. She hated that Lucy was right. She had been avoiding the hardest questions, afraid of reopening wounds that were barely scabbed over, but she couldn't move forward without understanding. Not fully. That evening, she stood outside Alex's door, her heart pounding. She almost turned back, almost ran away from the confrontation she had been dreading. But she knocked. Alex opened the door, his face lighting up with surprise. Emma? She didn't waste time with pleasantries. I need the truth, all of it. No more half answers or excuses. I need to know why. He looked stricken, his eyes widening. Okay. Come in. She stepped inside, her arms folded tightly, around herself as if to shield her from the pain she knew was coming. Alex's apartment was sparse, barren even. It looked like a place of limbo, a place for someone waiting, hoping. They sat across from each other, the air thick with tension. Emma's gaze was unwavering, demanding honesty. Tell me everything. Alex took a deep breath, his shoulders slumping. It started after your promotion. You were so happy, so driven, and I was lost. I didn't know who I was anymore. She frowned. So this is my fault? Because I was happy? No. He leaned forward, panic in his eyes. The days that followed were a blur of emotions Emma struggled to name. Anger, sadness, relief, and confusion churned within her, leaving her exhausted. She replayed Alex's confession in her mind, each word echoing in the hollow spaces of her heart. She wanted to hate him. It would have been easier if she could simply write him off as a villain, but she couldn't. The man who had betrayed her was the same man who had held her when she cried, who knew how she took her coffee, who could make her laugh with just a look. It was the same man who had loved her once, and maybe, in his own broken way, still did. Emma threw herself into work, avoiding calls from her mother and texts from friends who meant well but couldn't understand. She became a ghost in her own life, going through the motions but feeling nothing. One afternoon, she sat at her desk, staring blankly at her computer screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She was supposed to be drafting a press release, but the words wouldn't come. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Alex, to his haunted eyes, to his voice cracking as he confessed his weakness. A knock at her office door snapped her out of her daze. She looked up to see Mark, her boss, leaning against the doorframe with his usual easygoing smile. "Got a minute?" he asked, stepping inside without waiting for an answer. "Sure," she replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mark sat down, his expression softening as he looked at her. "You've been off lately. Not just today, for a while now. Is everything okay?" Emma opened her mouth to lie, to say she was fine, just tired, but the words stuck in her throat. Her composure cracked, and she looked away, her eyes burning. "It's complicated." Mark's face grew serious. "If you need time off, take it. Whatever's going on, work will be here when you're ready." His kindness made her chest ache. "Thanks. I don't know how to deal with it yet." He nodded, his gaze understanding. "I get it. But don't go through it alone, okay? If you need to talk, I'm here." His offer hung in the air, heavy with unspoken concern. Emma's throat tightened, but she managed to nod. "I appreciate that." Mark stood, giving her shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Hang in there. You're stronger than you think." After he left, Emma sat in silence, his words echoing in her mind. Stronger than you think. She didn't feel strong. She felt broken, shattered by the man she had trusted most in the world. But Mark's words stirred something inside her, a flicker of resilience. She didn't know if she could forgive Alex or if she even wanted to, but she knew she couldn't keep running from the truth. She had to face it, even if it meant facing the pain. Chapter 19. Echoes of the Heart-It. Was late when Emma found herself standing outside Alex's apartment again, her hands trembling. She hadn't planned to come. In fact, she had sworn she wouldn't. But here she was, her heart pounding as she raised her fist to knock. The door opened before she could, Alex standing there with red-rimmed eyes and a weary expression. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Emma?" His voice was hoarse, surprised but hopeful. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to hold his gaze. "I need to understand. Why her?" His face fell, his shoulders slumping. "I didn't choose her, Emma. I was just weak. She was there when I felt worthless. I convinced myself it meant nothing. But it did. It meant I was a coward." Her eyes stung, tears she didn't want to shed threatening to fall. "Did you ever love her?" "No. I never stopped loving you." His voice cracked, raw and broken. "But I failed you. I failed us." She looked at him, at the man who had shattered her heart, who now stood before her, stripped of all his defenses. "You were my best friend, Alex, my safe place. And you destroyed that." His face crumpled, guilt etched into every line. "I know. And I would do anything to undo it. But I can't." They stood in silence, the weight of his words settling. Around them, Emma felt the ache in her chest, the longing for the life they once had, the life they could never get back. "I miss you," she whispered, her voice trembling. I miss who we were, but I don't know if I can ever trust you again. His eyes filled with pain. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to earn it back, even if you never forgive me. She closed her eyes, the tears finally spilling over. I hate that I still love you. I hate that you can hurt me this much. He took a step closer, his voice shaking. I never deserved you. I see that now. But I'll spend every day trying to be better, even if it's too late. Emma's resolve wavered, her heart torn between love and betrayal. She wanted to walk away, to protect herself from more pain, but she couldn't deny the echo of her love for him, the bond that had once been unbreakable. I need time, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Time to figure out who I am without you, and if we have anything left to save. Days turned into weeks, and Emma found herself navigating the delicate balance between healing and remembering. She kept her distance from Alex, responding to his occasional texts with brief, guarded replies. She wasn't ready to see him again, but she couldn't bring herself to cut him off completely. At night, she lay awake, haunted by memories of their first date, of lazy Sunday mornings tangled in each other's arms, of the way he used to look at her like she was his whole world. Those memories clashed with the images she couldn't forget, the text messages, the lies, the look on his face when he confessed. It was a constant push and pull, love and anger wrestling inside her, leaving her drained and uncertain. One Saturday afternoon, she visited her parents' house, seeking comfort in the familiar. Her mother was in the kitchen, humming as she cooked, the scent of rosemary and garlic filling the air. Emma stood in the doorway watching her, feeling like a child. Again. Her mother glanced up, her eyes softening. You look tired, sweetheart. Have you been eating enough? Emma managed a weak smile. I'm fine, Mom. Just a lot on my mind. Her mother's face grew serious as she wiped her hands on a towel and motioned for Emma to sit at the kitchen table. I've been worried about you. Is everything okay with you and Alex? The question hit like a punch to the gut. Emma looked down at her hands, twisting them together. No, everything's not okay. Her mother sat beside her, her hand warm on Emma's shoulder. Do you want to talk about it? For a moment, Emma hesitated. She had kept the truth to herself, afraid of her parents' judgment, afraid of admitting how broken her marriage had become. But the words spilled out before she could stop them. He cheated on me, Mom, with someone from his office. Her voice cracked, the pain raw and fresh. He lied to me for months. I don't know how to forgive him, or if I even want to. Her mother's face fell, shock and sorrow filling her eyes. Oh, Emma, I'm so sorry. She pulled Emma into a tight hug, her embrace warm and familiar. I had no idea. Emma leaned into her mother's shoulder, tears she had been holding back finally breaking free. I loved him. I trusted him, and he ruined everything. Her mother held her, rubbing her back as Emma cried. When she finally pulled away, her mother's face was etched with concern. I can't tell you what to do, sweetheart. Only you know what you can live with. But don't let his mistakes define you. You deserve to be happy, with or without him. Emma wiped her eyes, her mother's words sinking in. She didn't know if she could ever forgive Alex, but she knew she had to find her own way forward for herself. Chapter 21. Confrontation and Confession. It was late when Emma's phone buzzed with a message from Alex. Alex, can we talk? I need to tell you something I should have told you sooner. Her heart skipped a beat. She hesitated before typing her response. Emma. Okay, tomorrow at my place. The next evening, Alex stood at her doorstep, looking anxious and weary. She let him in, keeping her distance as he stepped into the living room. He looked around. his face tightening as his eyes fell on the framed photos of them together, remnants of the life they once shared. Emma crossed her arms, her voice cold. "What did you want to tell me?" Alex looked at her, his face shadowed, with guilt. "I ended things with her, a month before you found out. I thought if I cut it off, I could fix us without you ever knowing." Emma's chest tightened, anger flaring. "You thought lying would fix us?" His shoulders sagged. "I was a coward. I was terrified of losing you, but I already had, the moment I betrayed you. I see that now." She looked away, her eyes burning. "Why now? Why tell me this now?" "Because you deserve the truth," he said, his voice shaking. "I lied to you for months, and I can't live with that anymore. I've hurt you enough. You deserve to know everything." She swallowed hard, her heart aching. "I don't know if I can believe anything you say anymore." He stepped closer, his eyes pleading. "I don't expect you to, but I'm done lying. I owe you that much." Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Emma's mind raced, caught between the love she still felt and the pain his lies had caused. "I can't just forgive you, Alex. It's not that simple." Her voice was raw, trembling. "You broke me. You broke us." He looked down, his face crumpling. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself for that." He looked up, his eyes shining with tears. "But I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance, to prove I'm better than the man who hurt you." Emma's heart twisted, torn between anger and the lingering echo of love. She wanted to scream, to throw him out, to slam the door on the life they had shared. But she couldn't move, frozen by the pain and the hope that refused to die. "Go home, Alex," she whispered, her voice hollow. One evening, as she walked home from work, Emma saw someone familiar standing outside her building. Julia. Her heart skipped a beat, anger and curiosity flaring in equal measure. She hadn't spoken to Julia since the day she found out about the affair, and seeing her here, standing awkwardly on the sidewalk, was like a punch to the gut. Emma walked up, her voice cold. "What are you doing here?" Julia looked up, guilt and shame evident on her face. "I know I'm the last person you want to see, but I needed to talk to you. Just once." Emma crossed her arms, her jaw tightening. "You have a lot of nerve showing up here." "I know," Julia whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. "But I can't live with myself knowing how much I hurt you. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I need you to know that I never meant for any of this to happen." Emma's anger flared. "You didn't mean for it to happen? You slept with my husband, Julia. You lied to me, to my face, for months." Her voice shook with emotion. "How do you accidentally do that?" Julia's shoulders sagged, her face crumpling. "I know. I was selfish. I was lonely and Alex was there and I convinced myself it didn't mean anything, but it did. It meant everything, and I destroyed your life because of it." She wiped her eyes, struggling to keep her composure. "I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so sorry." Emma's chest tightened, the pain raw and familiar. "Why now? Why apologize now?" "Because I'm leaving. I took a job out of state. I couldn't stay here. Not after everything I did." Julia looked down, her shoulders trembling. "I just needed you to know how sorry I am before I go." Emma stared at her, the woman who had shattered her life, who had stolen her husband's loyalty, who had been both friend and betrayer. She searched Julia's face for any sign of deception, but saw only regret and sorrow. The anger she had been carrying for so long began to crack, giving way to exhaustion. She was tired of being angry, tired of hurting. She let out a long breath, her voice soft. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, but I hope you find a way to live with yourself." because I'm still trying to figure out how to live with what you did." Julia nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand. Thank you for at least hearing me out." She hesitated, then turned and walked away, her figure fading into the evening shadows. Emma watched her go, feeling a strange sense of relief. She had faced the person who had wronged her, spoken her truth, and for the first time in months, she felt just a little bit lighter. Chapter 24. The Dinner Invitation. That night, Emma sat alone in her apartment, her mind racing, confronting. Julia had been cathartic, but it didn't change the fact that Alex had betrayed her too. Her phone buzzed again, another message from Alex. "Alex, I'm not giving up on us, Emma. I'll wait as long as it takes. But if you want me to leave you alone, just say the word, and I will." She stared at the words, her heart aching. He was giving her an out, a chance to end things without confrontation. It would be easy to let him go, to block his number, to shut him out and move on. But she didn't want the easy way out. She wanted closure. After a long pause, she typed her response. "Emma, dinner tomorrow night. We need to talk." Chapter 25. A Table Set for Two. The next evening, Emma set the table with care, arranging the silverware, lighting candles. She didn't know why she was trying so hard, but it felt important, like a ritual for the life they had shared, for the love they had lost. When the doorbell rang, her heart skipped a beat. She opened the door to find Alex standing there, looking nervous and hopeful, holding a bouquet of her favorite flowers, peonies, soft pink and white. She took them, her voice even. "You didn't have to bring these." He gave her a sad smile. "I know, but I wanted to." They sat across from each other, the silence heavy, the candlelight flickering between them. Emma took a deep breath, her fingers gripping the edge of the table. "I talked to Julia yesterday." His face fell, shame washing over him. "I'm so sorry, Emma. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen." "That's what she said, too," Emma replied, her voice hollow. "But it did happen. And now we're here." She looked him in the eyes, pain and love swirling inside her. "Why did you do it, Alex?" He looked down, his shoulders slumping. "I was stupid. I felt disconnected, like we were just roommates, living side by side but not really together. I was insecure and Julia made me feel wanted, like I mattered." He looked up, his eyes glistening. "But it was a lie. She was just a distraction from my own failures." Emma swallowed, her heart aching. "And what about me? Did I matter?" His voice broke. "You mattered more than anything. You still do. I was just too blind to see it, until it was too late." Silence hung between them, heavy and suffocating. Days passed, each one dragging slower than the last. Emma went through the motions: work, grocery shopping, errands. But her mind was somewhere else, trapped in the whirlwind of emotions Alex's letter had stirred. His words haunted her, echoing in her thoughts at the most inconvenient moments. She could still feel the weight of his regret, the depth of his sorrow. But regret didn't erase betrayal. She found herself staring at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, wondering how she had ended up here, alone, heartbroken, questioning every memory, every promise. She felt like a stranger in her own life. The woman she saw was a shadow of who she used to be, eyes hollow with sleepless nights and tear-stained cheeks. One evening, she sat on the edge of her bed, the letter in her hands. She had read it so many times she had memorized every word, every smudge of ink. Yet it still hurt, reopening wounds that hadn't even begun to heal. She knew she couldn't keep living like this, stuck between the past and an uncertain future. She needed to make a choice. Chapter 30. The decision Emma called Alex, her voice steady despite the trembling in her chest. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you." His silence was heavy, laden with hope and fear. "Of course, whenever you're ready." They agreed to meet at a small cafe on the corner of Maple Street, a place they used to frequent when they were dating. It felt ironic, returning to a place where they had once been so happy, where they had whispered dreams of forever, not knowing how fragile those dreams truly were. When she arrived, he was already there, waiting outside, his eyes shadowed and his posture tense. He looked exhausted, worry etched into his features. She wondered if he had been sleeping any better than she had. They sat across from each other, the table a barrier between them. "I read your letter," she said, her voice low. His shoulders slumped. "I didn't know if you would." "I almost didn't," she admitted, her fingers playing with the edge of her coffee cup. "But I did. And it broke me all over again." Alex looked down, guilt washing over his face. "I'm so sorry, Emma." "I know you are," she whispered. "But that doesn't change what happened." Silence fell between them, heavy and suffocating. She could see the pain in his eyes, the regret that seemed to cling to him like a shadow. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I still love you, Alex. And that's what makes this so hard. I can't just stop feeling that way. Even after everything." His eyes widened, a flicker of hope sparking within them. "Emma, but I also don't know if I can forgive you," she continued, her voice cracking. "I don't know how to forget what you did, or how to trust you again." His expression crumbled, his hands shaking as he reached for his coffee, needing something to hold on to. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to take me back. But if there's even a small chance that we could rebuild this, I'll fight for it. For you." She looked away, her heart aching. "How do I know it won't happen again? How do I know you won't hurt me again?" "You don't," he admitted, his voice raw. "I can't promise that I'll never make another mistake, but I can promise that I'll never take you for granted again. I'll never stop choosing you every day for the rest of my life. If you'll let me." Emma felt tears well up, her vision blurring. She wanted to believe him, to believe that they could find a way forward, but she was scared, terrified of being hurt again, of making the wrong choice. "I need time," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't just jump back in, not after everything." He nodded, his expression solemn. "Take all the time you need. I'll be here, waiting, no matter how long it takes." They sat in silence, the cafe bustling around them, oblivious to the heartbreak unfolding at their table. For a moment, they were just two people trying to navigate the wreckage of what once was, searching for a way to rebuild or walk away. She stood up, her legs trembling. "I should go." Alex rose as well, his eyes never leaving hers. "If you ever want to talk about anything, I'm here." Emma managed a nod, unable to find the words. She turned and walked out of the cafe, her heart heavy and her mind spinning. As she stepped into the cool evening air, she realized that no matter what she chose, nothing would ever be the same. Their love was forever changed, fractured by betrayal and tainted by lies. But maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to piece it back together, or maybe they would have to learn how to live without each other. End of chapter 30. The days following her meeting with Alex felt like a blur. Time moved, but it didn't feel like it was taking her anywhere. She returned to her routines, but everything was different. The familiar hum of her life was now overshadowed by the weight of her thoughts about Alex, about forgiveness, and about whether they could truly rebuild something so broken. She had told herself she needed space, but the silence between them only seemed to deepen the gap. It wasn't the absence of words that troubled her. It was the lack of clarity, the inability to decide what came next. Her conversations with friends and family had become increasingly strained. They meant well, but their advice felt like noise, like an overwhelming tide she couldn't escape. "You deserve better, Emma," her sister had said, her tone compassionate but firm. "You don't need to waste your time on someone who hurt you." But Emma wasn't sure if she agreed. She wasn't sure of anything anymore. Chapter 32. A change in the air one evening after a long day at work. Emma found herself walking through the quiet streets of the neighborhood, the cool air brushing against her skin. She didn't know where she was headed. She just needed to be somewhere else. As she passed the park, she saw a figure sitting on a bench beneath the dim light of a nearby lamppost. It was Alex. Her first instinct was to turn around, to walk away and avoid the inevitable conversation that always followed their encounters. But something kept her rooted to the spot, a tug at her chest that refused to let go. Slowly, she approached him. His face lit up when he saw her, but there was a vulnerability in his eyes that made her heart ache. "I didn't expect to see you." "Here," he said, his voice soft. "I didn't expect to come," she replied, unsure if that was the truth. There was an awkward pause before Alex stood up, stepping closer to her. "I know you need time, Emma. I'm not rushing you. I just want to be honest with you about everything." She met his gaze, her heart racing. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, as if weighing his next words carefully. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about how you don't know if you can trust me again. And honestly, I don't blame you, but I can't keep living like this, like we're in limbo. I want you to know I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right, even if it means starting over completely. If that's what it takes for you to trust me again." Emma's breath caught in her throat. His sincerity was overwhelming, but so was the fear that rose within her. Was he just saying the right things, or had he truly changed? "I'm not asking for everything right now," Alex continued, his voice steady despite the uncertainty in his eyes. "I'm just asking for a chance to prove that I can be the man you deserve." For a long moment, Emma said nothing. She searched his face for some sign that this wasn't just desperation, but a real change, a shift that might somehow make their brokenness worth mending. "I don't know if I can do that," she said finally, the words tasting like sand in her mouth. Alex closed his eyes, as though he had been expecting that answer but wasn't ready to accept it. "I understand," he said quietly, "but I'll wait. For as long as it takes. I'll wait for you to find your way back to me, if that's what you want." The night seemed to stretch on as they stood there, facing each other. The city around them was unaware of the quiet, heartache that hung in the air, but Emma could feel it in every fiber of her being. Could she really trust him again? Could she forgive him for the depths of the betrayal? Her heart ached with the weight of the decision, but she knew one thing: she wasn't ready to make it tonight. "I need more time," she whispered, her voice breaking just a little. "I know," Alex said softly. "I'll give you that." He stepped back, turning away just slightly. But then he paused. "Emma, no matter what happens, I want you to know. You're everything to me. I'm not giving up on us." With that, he walked away, leaving her standing alone in the dim light of the park, unsure of everything and yet, somehow, more certain than ever that her decision would be the hardest thing she'd ever have to face. Chapter 33. The Aftermath. The following weeks blurred into each other, the days flowing into one another with the same rhythm as always, but nothing felt the same. Emma's thoughts were consumed with Alex, but also with herself, who she was now, what she needed, and what she could forgive. She questioned every interaction, every choice, as though trying to make sense of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. She couldn't talk to Alex every day, not yet. But every time they did speak, it was a reminder of what was lost, what they had, and what had been broken. The question still haunted her. Could she ever forgive him? She wasn't sure. But every time she thought about the future without him, it felt unbearable. Alex arrived at her apartment just as the sun began to dip below the horizon. The faint glow of twilight bathed the room in soft, muted colors, and for a moment, Emma could almost pretend that everything was as it once was, that they hadn't been pulled apart by betrayal, by secrets. But the reality of it lingered, sharp and undeniable. She opened the door slowly, her pulse quickening as she saw him standing there, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets, his face a mix of hope and uncertainty. "I didn't know if you'd actually call," he said, his voice almost too soft, as though afraid of breaking the fragile tension between them. "I wasn't sure either," Emma replied, her throat dry. She stepped aside to let him in, her eyes lingering on him longer than she intended. She couldn't help but notice the way his eyes darted around the room, as though searching for some sign, some clue, that she had truly decided. They stood in silence for a moment, neither of them sure how to bridge the gap that had formed between them. Finally, Alex spoke. "I'm here, Emma. Whatever you need, however long it takes. I want to fix this, but I can't fix it alone." His words hit her like a wave, crashing into her with the force of all the emotions she had tried to suppress. She had spent so many nights alone, wondering if it was possible to heal, if it was possible to forgive. And now, standing here with him, she realized how much she wanted it to work, how much she needed him to be the person he had once been. But the truth was, she didn't know if that was even possible. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Alex," she said, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. "Not yet. I don't know if I ever can." Alex didn't look away. Instead, he took a step forward, his eyes steady. "I know, and I'm not asking you to. I'm asking for a chance to show you I can be better. I know it's not easy, and I know it's going to take time, but I'm willing to put in the work for you. For us." Emma closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. The weight of the decision felt almost too much to bear. Was she willing to open her heart again? Was she willing to risk the possibility of it all falling apart once more? "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I'm so tired of being hurt." Alex's face softened, and he stepped closer, reaching out tentatively, almost as though waiting for her permission. "I know," he said quietly, "and I'm sorry. I'll spend every day trying to make up for it if you'll let me. But I won't push you. If you need time, I'll give it to you." She met his gaze, searching for any sign of doubt, but all she found was sincerity. The same sincerity she had once fallen for. But that sincerity alone couldn't undo the damage, couldn't erase the pain. "I need you to promise me something," Emma said, her voice firm despite the crack that trembled through it. "If I do this, if I try to forgive you, there can be no more lies, no more secrets. I need to know that everything between us will be out in the open, no matter how hard it gets." Alex nodded, his expression resolute. "No more lies, I swear." She looked at him, studying his face, and for a fleeting moment, she saw the man she had once loved, the man who had been her partner, her confidant, the person she had trusted with her heart. But that trust had been shattered, and trust wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. "I can't promise anything," Emma said finally, her voice small but resolute. "But I'm willing to try, to see if we can rebuild something. Maybe not everything, but something." Alex's eyes softened, a mixture of relief and uncertainty clouding his expression. "That's all I'm asking for. A chance." Emma swallowed, feeling a lump form in her throat. She wasn't sure if this was the right decision. She wasn't sure if she was ready to forgive him, to move forward. But for the first time in months, She felt like she was taking a step in the right direction, no matter how small or uncertain it was. "I can't promise it'll be easy," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "But I'm here. I'm willing to try." Alex reached out, pulling her into a tentative embrace. She hesitated at first, unsure if she could allow herself to be vulnerable. But then, as the warmth of his touch surrounded her, she let herself lean into him. And for a brief moment, they were just two people, holding on to each other amidst the uncertainty, trying to find their way back to something they had once lost. Chapter 36. A Quiet Beginning. In the weeks that followed, Emma and Alex took small steps toward healing. They attended therapy together, confronting the difficult conversations and painful truths that had been buried for far too long. Each session was a battle, but each was also a victory as they slowly began to rebuild the foundation of their relationship. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the weight of everything threatened to overwhelm them, when the silence between them felt suffocating. Months passed, and while the scars of the betrayal never fully healed, Emma and Alex learned to navigate their new normal. Their conversations had become more open, less strained. They spoke about their past, about the secrets, the lies, and the things they had never said to each other before. But even as they worked to rebuild, there were moments when the weight of their history crept up on them, threatening to pull them under. One evening, as they sat on the couch together, Emma noticed Alex's gaze fixed on something beyond her, something far away, as though his thoughts were still tangled in the past. She knew the look. She had seen it too many times before. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her voice soft. He turned to her, his eyes shadowed. "I don't know," he replied. "It's just, sometimes it feels like we're not really moving forward, like we're still stuck in that same place where everything went wrong." Emma felt a pang in her chest, but she tried to remain steady. She knew what he meant. She had been thinking the same thing. They were both trying to outrun the past, but the truth was, they couldn't escape it. It would always be there, lingering like a shadow between them. "Maybe we're just finding our way," she said quietly. "It's not going to be perfect. But we're here, Alex. We're trying." "I know." He nodded, but the doubt in his voice was still there. "But is trying enough? Or are we just fooling ourselves into thinking we can make it work?" Emma didn't have an answer. She wanted to believe that they could overcome everything, that the love they had once shared could survive the cracks, the breaks, but there was no guarantee. And sometimes, even with the best intentions, love wasn't enough. "I don't know," she whispered, her heart heavy. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm not ready to give up yet." Alex looked at her, his expression softening. "Neither am I." They sat in silence for a moment, both of them lost in their thoughts. Emma could feel the weight of the years between them, the things they had never said, the things that still hung in the air like ghosts. And yet, despite everything, she felt the smallest thread of hope, a fragile thread that might just be enough to hold them together. Chapter 38. The test-it was a rainy Tuesday. When the test came, Alex had received an unexpected phone call that morning, one that left him quiet, distant. He hadn't told Emma the details, but the shift in his behavior was unmistakable. He had been tense, preoccupied, almost as if a storm was brewing just beneath the surface. By the time he came home that evening, Emma could tell something had changed. There was an urgency in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a sense of unease that made her heart race. "I need to talk to you," Alex said, his voice tight, his jaw clenched. Emma braced herself, already dreading what was coming. "What's going on?" Alex hesitated, looking at her as if weighing his words. Then, without another moment of hesitation, he spoke. It's about work. There's been an investigation. Some of the people I've been working with, people I trusted, turns out they've been involved in something illegal, and I'm being pulled into it. Emma's stomach twisted. What do you mean? What kind of investigation? Alex ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in the sharpness of his movements. I don't know all the details yet, but it's bad, Emma. There's talk of money laundering, of embezzlement, and I don't know who I can trust anymore. I don't know if I'm being dragged into something I have no part in, or if I'm already too deep to get out. For a moment, Emma stood frozen, her mind spinning. The weight of the betrayal she had already endured, and the possibility that it was happening again felt like a crushing blow. "You're telling me this now?" she said, her voice trembling. "After everything that's happened, you're involved in this, and you're only telling me now?" "I didn't know what to say, Emma," Alex said, his voice tight with guilt. "I've been trying to figure it out, but I'm scared, and I didn't want to drag you into this mess." Emma's mind raced, her heart pounding in her chest. She had thought they were moving past the secrets, past the lies, but now, this new revelation felt like a fresh betrayal, one that threatened to undo everything they had worked for. "I can't keep doing this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't keep living in the shadows of your mistakes, Alex. I can't." His face fell, and for a brief moment, Emma saw the raw desperation in his eyes. But it wasn't enough to make her change her mind. Not this time. "I'm sorry," Alex said quietly. "I never wanted to hurt you again, but I don't know what to do." Emma turned away, her breath shallow as she tried to calm the storm inside her. "I don't know either, but I can't keep being part of something that feels like it's falling apart." The days that followed were a blur. Emma retreated into herself, spending her time sorting through the pile of unanswered questions that had formed between her and Alex. She had thought they were past the worst of it, that they could rebuild, that they could move forward. But now, with Alex's latest revelation, it felt as though the ground had shifted beneath her feet again. She didn't know what to believe anymore, or who to trust. She tried to go about her daily routine, but her thoughts always drifted back to Alex. She would replay his words in her mind: money laundering, embezzlement, people I trusted. Each time, a sickening pit would form in her stomach. She had a decision to make, and she knew it wasn't going to be easy. Chapter 40. The confrontation. It was late one evening when Emma found herself standing outside the door of the small law office that had become her refuge in the chaos. A part of her had wanted to avoid it, to keep living in ignorance, but the truth always had a way of catching up with you. She needed answers, real answers. As she stepped into the dimly lit office, the scent of old leather and coffee filled her senses. The attorney, a woman named Lauren, was waiting for her. "I'm glad you could make it," Lauren said, offering Emma a warm but knowing smile. She had become Emma's confidant over the past few days, someone to talk to when everything else felt like a storm of emotions. "I don't know what to do anymore," Emma confessed, sinking into the chair across from Lauren's desk. "Alex, I thought he was done with all the lies. But now this investigation, these secrets, how do I trust him again?" Lauren leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Trust is a fragile thing, Emma. It's not something you can rebuild overnight, but it's also not something you can throw away just because things are hard. The question is, do you believe that Alex is telling you the truth now? Is he still the person you married, or has he become someone you no longer recognize?" Emma was silent for a long moment, her mind racing. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know if I can forgive him. I don't know if I want to forgive him." Lauren nodded sympathetically. "You don't have to have all the answers. Right now, you just need to figure out what you want, what you can live with." Chapter 41. The Return of the Past. The phone call came 3 days later. Emma had been sitting at the kitchen table staring blankly at the untouched cup of tea in front of her when her phone buzzed. It was Alex. Her stomach twisted as she swiped to answer. "Emma," Alex said, his voice strained. I need to tell you something. There's more. More I haven't told you, and it's important. You have to hear me out." She felt the familiar tug of anxiety settle deep in her chest. "What is it, Alex?" "I've been working with a man named Jake Turner. He's been helping me with the financial side of things, but now I'm not sure where his loyalties lie. I think he's involved in something bigger. And I think he's using me to cover his tracks. Emma, I'm scared. I don't know who I can trust anymore." Emma's head spun. Jake Turner. She had heard that name before, at a dinner party they'd attended months ago. Jake had been someone Alex spoke highly of, a trusted colleague in his line of work. But now everything felt tainted. "You need to stop, Alex," Emma said, her voice low but firm. "You need to tell me the truth, all of it. I don't care about your connections or your work anymore. I need to know who you are now. I need to know if I'm living with a stranger." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Emma could hear Alex breathing heavily, the tension in the silence almost unbearable. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can fix this, Emma. I don't know if I can make things right again." Tears welled in Emma's eyes, but she fought them back. "You don't have to fix anything. You just have to be honest with me." About Everything, Chapter 42. The Breaking Point. That night, Alex returned home late, his face a mask of exhaustion and fear. Emma was waiting for him, her expression unreadable. He stood in the doorway. For a moment, unsure of how to proceed. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. "Emma," he started, his voice rough. "I'm sorry for everything. I should have told you sooner. I should have been more honest. But I was scared. I was afraid of losing you." Emma didn't respond immediately. She could feel the weight of his apology, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to undo the damage. "You don't get to apologize for everything, Alex," she said, her voice calm but firm. "You don't get to erase the past just because you're sorry now. What you did, what you've done, it's bigger than that. It's about trust. And I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Alex's face fell, and for a moment, Emma thought she saw the man he used to be, the man she had once loved. The days that followed were suffocating, the silence between Emma and Alex filling their home with an almost tangible weight. It was as if the air itself had thickened, every word left unsaid hanging like a cloud, every glance a conversation they didn't want to have. Emma went about her days in a fog. She tried to focus on work, on the mundane routine of life, dishes, laundry, emails, but it all felt hollow. Alex's absence, not in body but in every unspoken word, seemed to fill the space where their love had once been. She spent hours talking to herself, her own reflection in the bathroom mirror, her own voice echoing in the emptiness. "How could I get here? How did I miss it?" The whispers came often, gnawing at her, feeding the doubt, the regret, the disbelief. She thought about the day she found out about the affair, about all the lies that had piled up, each one another small stone added to the wall between them. The betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was the deceit, the manipulation, the secrets that Alex had kept from her for years. How could someone so close to her, someone she thought she knew, be capable of this? And yet the part of her that had once loved him still existed, faintly, in the corners of her heart. She couldn't forget the man he used to be, the man who held her hand through the worst of it, the man who whispered promises of forever in the quiet moments between them. She wasn't sure if that version of him had ever been real, or if it was just a story she had told herself, but it lingered, a shadow of a memory that refused to let her go. Chapter 44. The call from Jake Turner one evening, as Emma was finishing up dinner, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it absently, assuming it was another text from her friend Lucy or a work notification. But when she saw the name on the screen, her pulse skipped. Jake Turner. Her mind raced. Jake, Alex's colleague, the man Alex had mentioned so many times before, the man who had been entwined in the dangerous world Alex had always tried to shield her from. Why was he calling now? With a mixture of curiosity and dread, Emma answered. "Emma." Jake's voice came through, smooth but tight. "I know this might seem out of the blue, but I think we need to talk." There was a pause, like he was waiting for her to refuse. "What's this about?" she asked, her voice steady despite the unease creeping up her spine. "I think you know. Alex hasn't told you everything, has he? There are things I think you need to hear. About him, about me, about what's been going on." Jake's voice held something in it, a warning or maybe an invitation to a game she wasn't sure she wanted to play. Emma's heart hammered in her chest. "I don't know if I trust you, Jake. After everything—" "Listen," he interrupted, his tone shifting, urgent. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to listen. There's more going on than you think. You've only seen the surface of it. Alex is in over his head and he's dragged you into it. I can help you understand, but you need to meet me in person." She hesitated. She wasn't sure what kind of trap this was, whether it was a game Jake was playing, or if he truly had something valuable to say. But something in his voice, something in the gravity of his words, pushed her forward. "Where?" "I'll text you the address. We need to talk before this gets worse." Before she could respond, he hung up, leaving her holding the phone, staring at the screen in disbelief. Her thoughts swirled. Should I go? What does he know? What is Alex really hiding? Chapter 45. Unraveling the Truth. The address Jake sent her led to a small, dimly lit bar on the outskirts of the city. Emma wasn't sure what she was expecting when she stepped inside, but the musty air and half-empty tables gave the place an unsettling feeling. Jake was sitting in a corner booth, his back to the wall, as if he were expecting trouble. As Emma approached, he stood up, a faint smile playing on his lips, but there was something sharp in his eyes. It made her skin crawl. "Thanks for coming," Jake said, his voice low but measured. "I know this isn't exactly ideal, but I needed you to hear what I have to say." Emma slid into the booth across from him, her gaze narrowing. "What's this all about, Jake? You've made it clear that Alex isn't who he seems, but I still don't understand why you're telling me this." Jake leaned in, his voice dropping further. "Because I know you're in the dark. Alex, he's deeper into something than he's letting on. I think you need to know the truth, the whole truth." The words hung in the air like a promise. Emma's heart raced. She wasn't sure she wanted to hear it, but she also knew she needed to. "Go on," she urged, though her voice was tinged with fear. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it, Emma. Alex got involved in something dangerous. He started doing favors for people who weren't exactly law-abiding, and the deeper he got, the more involved you became." Emma arrived home in the dead of night, the quiet of the house unsettling. She barely noticed the ticking of the old clock on the wall, or the faint hum of the refrigerator in the background. All she could think about was Jake's words, the weight of his revelations sinking deeper with every step. She had to confront Alex, no more avoiding it. She found him in the kitchen, a beer in his hand, standing by the counter, his back turned to her. His posture was casual, too casual, but Emma could tell something was off. He hadn't heard her. "Come in, Alex," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing as he saw the storm in hers. "What's wrong?" His voice was tired, guarded, like he already knew the question was coming but didn't want to face it. She didn't waste any time. "I know," she said flatly, cutting through the tension. Alex stiffened, his gaze flickering, briefly to the floor before meeting her eyes again. "What are you talking about?" "I know everything, Alex." Her words hung in the air, the weight of them like a blow. "I know about your favors, about the people you've been dealing with, the lies, the secrets. You owe them something, don't you?" Alex's jaw clenched, and for a long moment he didn't speak. Emma could see the gears turning behind his eyes, the calculations running. He was deciding how to lie, how to spin this, but the truth was already out. There was no room left for games. "Who told you?" he finally asked, his voice low, almost defensive. "Jake Turner," she replied, her voice cold. "He told me everything." Alex looked away, exhaling slowly as if the weight of her words were too much to bear. He set the beer down on the counter, his fingers tapping the edge. His eyes were distant, somewhere far away. "He shouldn't have told you that. I didn't want you to know." "Why, Alex?" Emma's voice cracked despite herself. "Why? Didn't you tell me? Why did you keep me in the dark about everything? I deserve to know what's going on." "I was trying to protect you," he said, his tone barely a whisper. "I thought I could handle it, that I could keep you out of it. But I couldn't. And now it's too late." Her chest tightened as the words hit her like a wave, the realization sinking in. "Too late?" she repeated, trying to hold back the hurt, the betrayal that threatened to overtake her. "You put me in this position, Alex. You lied to me, to my face. You built this wall around me, and now you're telling me it's too late. After everything?" Alex didn't respond immediately. He looked at her, his eyes weary, regretful. But there was still a defensiveness there, a part of him that wanted to protect his actions, his choices. Emma could see that, and it made her blood boil. "Was it worth it?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "All those lies? All the people you got involved with? Was it worth destroying everything we had?" He didn't answer right away, his gaze moving to the floor as though the weight of the question had momentarily silenced him. Finally, he met her eyes again, and this time there was no evading the truth. "No," he said quietly. "It wasn't. But by the time I realized it, I was too deep in. There's no going back." She swallowed, trying to keep herself steady, but the hurt was too much. "And now? Now what? Do you expect me to just forgive you and pretend everything is okay?" Alex's face twisted with frustration. "I don't know what I expect anymore, Emma. I've made mistakes. Big ones. But I didn't want to drag you into this. I didn't want to hurt you. Well, congratulations, Alex." Her words were biting now, her anger spilling over. "You've succeeded in hurting me, in ways I didn't even think were possible." There was a long silence between them, and in that moment, Emma could feel everything. The distance, the years of unspoken words, the cracks that had started to form long before the affair. She realized, with a sinking feeling, that she had known this in some way. She had known he was hiding something, but she had ignored the signs, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she was wrong. "I need time," she said, her voice barely above, a whisper. "I need to think. I don't know what to do with this, with you." Alex nodded slowly, a resignation settling over him. "I understand. Take all the time you need." Chapter 48. The breaking point. The days that followed were agonizingly quiet. Emma stayed in the guest room, her mind whirling with thoughts of what Jake had told her, what Alex had confessed, and the life they had built together now seemingly shattered into pieces. She barely slept, her thoughts too loud, too chaotic. She spent hours pacing the house, lost in her head, trying to make sense of the mess she had found herself in. She wanted to scream, to hit something, anything to release the anger and pain that had settled deep inside of her. But all she could do was sit in silence and try to piece together the wreckage. The days passed in a blur of uncertainty. Emma moved through her daily life like a ghost, caught between the fragments of her old reality and the gaping hole that Alex's betrayal had carved into everything she once believed. Every conversation with him felt like a test, a performance they both fumbled through, never quite able to meet each other's eyes for long enough to make the truth feel real. Alex tried. He tried harder than she had ever seen him try before. He showed up, he apologized, he sought therapy, he put effort into the little things that mattered. But his actions were wrapped in the same old layers of guilt and uncertainty, and Emma couldn't help but wonder if it was too little, too late. Could their marriage really survive this? She hadn't told anyone about the affair. She hadn't even told her closest friends or family about the weight on her shoulders. It felt too shameful, too raw to share. She wasn't sure if she even wanted their pity or their advice. She had to figure this out on her own. But then, as the weeks wore on, she started to notice the cracks in her own resolve. There were moments when Alex would do something small, like bringing her coffee in the morning or holding her hand as they watched TV together, and a part of her would soften. The love she had for him, however complicated, however painful, was still there. But it wasn't just love. It was resentment. It was anger. It was the haunting thought that she might never be able to look at him the same way again. One evening, after yet another conversation that felt more like a rehearsal than a real dialogue, Emma stood in front of the mirror in their bedroom, staring at her reflection. The woman who looked back at her was a stranger, worn and tired, her face lined with worry. She had never imagined that her life would come to this. The woman standing alone in a room she had once filled with love, now wondering whether she should stay or leave. She couldn't shake the thought that she wasn't just asking herself if she could forgive Alex. She was asking if she could ever forgive herself. Chapter 50. The ultimatum. It was late one night when Alex came to her, his face tense, his eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. He had been avoiding a deeper conversation for days, but Emma knew it was inevitable. "Emma," Alex began, his voice breaking, "I've been thinking about what you said, about the future, and whether we can make this work. I'm not asking you to forgive me right now. I know I don't deserve it. But I'm asking you to give me one more chance, one real chance." She turned to face him, her heart pounding. She had been dreading this moment. The moment when Alex would finally admit how much he wanted her back, and how desperately he needed her to believe in him again. "I don't know if I can," she said, her voice low. She wasn't trying to hurt him, but she knew there was truth in her words. "I've been living in this limbo, Alex. I've been waiting for something to click, for things to feel right again, but it doesn't. And I don't know if it ever will." Alex stepped closer, his hand reaching out to touch hers. "Please," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I'll do whatever it takes. I'll prove it to you. I'll show you that I can be the man you deserve. I love you, Emma. I never stopped loving you." The words hung in the air, thick and desperate. Emma closed her eyes, letting the sound of his voice wash over her. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that somehow, some way, their marriage could be salvaged. But the truth was, she was scared. Scared of repeating the cycle, scared of letting herself fall back into the trap of trusting him, only to be hurt again. "I need time," she said, her voice trembling. "I need more time to think about this. I can't promise anything right now, Alex." Alex looked at her with a mix of hope and defeat, but he didn't argue. He nodded slowly, stepping back. I'll wait. I'll give you as much time as you need. Just please don't give up on us. Emma watched him leave the room, his back hunched under the weight of his words. As the door closed behind him, she felt a sharp pang in her chest, an ache she couldn't quite place. Was she letting go of something that could still be saved? Or was she holding on to a love that would only hurt her more? She didn't know. Chapter 51. The Choice. It was a Saturday morning when Emma finally reached a breaking point. She had spent the last few days wrestling with her emotions, running through every scenario in her mind, each one filled with endless possibilities. She thought of her wedding day, the promise she had made to Alex, the vows they had exchanged. She thought of the first time she had caught him in a lie, the first time the cracks had started to show. And now, here she was, standing at the edge of a decision that felt as if it would shape the rest of her life. She sat down on the couch, staring blankly at the television, unable to focus on anything. Emma's phone call with Jake lingered in her thoughts, echoing in the corners of her mind. She hadn't made any concrete decisions yet, but something inside her was beginning to shift. For the first time in weeks, she felt as if she might actually be able to breathe again, if only for a moment. She had always been afraid of living in the aftermath of betrayal, convinced that the pieces of her life would never fit back together. But now she was starting to see that she had more control than she had allowed herself to believe. She didn't have to stay with Alex out of fear or guilt. She could choose. As the days passed, she made subtle changes in her routine, stepping outside the boundaries of the life she'd built with Alex. She started seeing a therapist, something she had avoided for months because she felt like it was admitting weakness or that she was giving up. But now, it felt like a small act of self-preservation, an acknowledgement that she couldn't do this alone. Therapy became a space where Emma could untangle the mess of emotions inside her. She spoke freely about the pain, the confusion, the anger. She even spoke about the brief moments of tenderness that still existed between her and Alex, those small gestures that both broke her heart and made her hesitate. In her sessions, Emma also came to understand that forgiveness wasn't something she owed Alex, it was something she had to find for herself. Whether or not she could ever forgive him didn't change the reality that he had hurt her. But maybe, just maybe, it was possible to forgive herself for being vulnerable, for trusting him, and for believing that love would somehow always protect. Chapter 53. The confrontation, one evening, a few days after her therapy session, Emma returned home from work, her mind racing with new clarity. She didn't know what it was, the therapy, the distance she'd put between herself and Alex, or maybe the small spark of strength she was beginning to feel, but she knew that it was time. It was time to have the conversation they had been avoiding for far too long. Alex was sitting at the kitchen table when she walked in, his head buried in his laptop. She noticed the way his shoulders stiffened when he heard her footsteps, as if he had been waiting for her to say something. She paused for a moment, gathering the courage she had been lacking for weeks. Then, taking a deep breath, she spoke. "Alex," she began, her voice steady, though the words felt heavy on her tongue. "I think we need to talk. Really talk." He closed the laptop with a soft click, his eyes meeting hers with a mix of apprehension and guilt. "I've been waiting for this," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "I know it's been hard for you. No." Emma interrupted, her tone sharper than she intended. "I don't need you to apologize again, not tonight. What I need is the truth, not just about the affair, but about everything." Alex seemed to shrink under the weight of her words, his face flushing with guilt. He nodded slowly, his eyes flicking down to the table. "I don't know where to start. I don't know how to explain." "You've been lying to me for so long, Alex. You've been lying to yourself, too. about why it happened, about who you really are, about the choices you've made," she said, her voice steady. But the pain was there, simmering beneath the surface. "I can't rebuild anything with you until I know if you even understand what you've done." Alex's hands clenched into fists on the table, and for a moment he looked like he might break down right there. "I do understand, Emma. I swear to you I do. It wasn't about you." "It never is it?" she said, her voice rising. "It's never about me. It's about your own selfishness, your own insecurities, your need for validation. I don't even recognize you anymore, Alex." The words hung in the air, sharp and unforgiving. Emma could see the way Alex flinched, as if the accusations were daggers. But in the next breath, something inside her began to settle. She wasn't saying these things to destroy him. She was saying them because they were the truth, and she was finally ready to hear it, to face it. "I don't want to hurt you," Alex said quietly, his voice breaking. I couldn't stop myself." Emma let out a bitter laugh. "Stop making excuses, Alex. You could have stopped. You chose not to." Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating, and for the first time in a long while, Emma didn't feel the overwhelming urge to collapse under the weight of his remorse. She had spent so long trying to protect him, trying to hold the pieces of their marriage together. But now she saw that her own healing couldn't happen until she let go of the need to fix everything. Chapter 54. The decision. The days that followed their conversation were tense but necessary. Alex began going to therapy on his own, and for the first time, Emma felt like he was actually trying to change, not for her, but for himself. The weeks following Emma's decision to try and rebuild with Alex were marked by small, tentative steps forward. The air in their home felt different, colder at times, but with a sense of quiet expectation that hung in the space between them. There were no grand gestures, no sweeping declarations of love, just the slow, painstaking process of untangling years of hurt and mistrust. Alex kept his word, attending therapy and working on himself. He was quieter than before, withdrawn in a way that felt both fragile and genuine. Emma noticed his efforts, though the emotional distance between them remained. She no longer saw the man she once adored. Instead, she saw someone trying, desperately trying, to find redemption in the wreckage of their life together. Still, every time Emma thought she might start to feel comfortable, a thought would creep into her mind, cold and insistent. Is this really enough? She had moments of weakness, days when the anger would rise up again, burning through the thin veneer of hope she was clinging to. On those days, she would find herself standing in front of the mirror, examining her own face, wondering what had happened to the woman she used to be, the woman who trusted, who believed, who loved without hesitation. Was she still in there somewhere beneath the layers of betrayal? Alex tried his best to make things right, but he couldn't erase what he'd done. The damage was still there, lurking beneath every conversation, every touch. He apologized again and again, each time as if the words might fix everything, but they never did. His apologies had started to feel like empty promises, like a man trying to make up for something that couldn't be undone. Chapter 56. The temptation one evening, as Emma returned home from work, her heart sinking at the sight of Alex sitting in the living room, a familiar tension in his posture. She'd been trying so hard to remain present, to work on their marriage, but a quiet unease was growing in the pit of her stomach, one she couldn't shake. "Hey," Alex said, his voice unusually soft. He stood as she walked in, his eyes searching hers for a sign of what was going on in her mind. "Hey," she replied, forcing a smile. She dropped her bag on the couch and tried to ignore the tightness in her chest. I don't want to put any pressure on you, but I think it's time for us to have a conversation about us." Alex said, his words measured, cautious. Emma paused, her breath catching. What do you mean? I mean, I know we've been taking it slow, and I know that you're still unsure of everything, but I can't help but feel like we're stuck, he said. Like we're not really moving forward, you know? She stared at him, unsure of what he was asking for. What are you saying, Alex? I'm saying that I don't want to keep going in circles. I don't want to be here, pretending that everything is okay if it's not. I'm not asking for a miracle, but if you're not sure you want to, try. Then maybe we should stop dragging this out. Maybe it's time to accept that we've reached the end. Emma felt her chest tighten as his words hung in the air. It was a question she had been dreading, one that she wasn't sure she was ready to answer. Could she admit, out loud, that she wasn't sure if she could forgive him? Could she admit that she didn't know if they could rebuild what had been destroyed? I don't know if I can do this anymore, she whispered, the words tasting like defeat on her tongue. I don't know if I can forgive you, not like this. Alex looked at her, his face a mixture of sorrow and understanding. I get it. I've hurt you too much, Emma. I've betrayed your trust in ways that can't be fixed with just words. I know that. Her throat tightened, and for a moment, she thought she might choke on the suffocating weight of everything they'd lost. She had spent so long trying to find a way forward with him, convincing herself that there was still a future, that maybe they could rebuild. But now, looking at him, she realized that it was too late. They were both too broken to fix. I've tried so hard, she said softly, her voice trembling. I've tried to make it work, but I feel like I'm just going through the motions. I don't know if that's enough anymore. The silence between them was thick with unspoken words, with all the things they both knew but hadn't been brave enough to say. Alex sighed, running a hand through his hair. Maybe we've both been holding on to something that isn't really there anymore. Emma swallowed hard, her heart aching as she considered the weight of his words. Maybe it wasn't enough. Maybe they weren't enough. Chapter 57. The Crossroads. The following weeks were filled with tension and silence. Emma found herself drifting further away from Alex, her once deep connection to him slowly slipping through her fingers. She couldn't ignore the deep-seated resentment that still simmered inside her,